So every once in a while, on a fairly regular basis, I'll do 72 to 90-hour fast. And it's amazing how your body just eats up all of these free radicals and all these different things. And you
Yeah,
realize your body's amazing. You just got to put the right things into your body and let it
right.
go to work.
For her, it was all a matter of balancing. And she also believed, and I think that younger people are more open to this and maybe than people in my generation who
Yeah.
are just more used to kind of experts telling us what to do. But the idea that God in his creation has provided and that in the world, on the earth, he has provided us with what we need to be healthy.
When these young people are coming, Lila, into the church, we have to make a connection with them into this whole vision. In other words, well, here I am with my own experiences in my own life, and then here's the church, right? And they're trying to figure out how these come together. What you just said is so important. You mentioned she was a mystic, she was analytical, and yet she was very practical. And
Yeah.
she studied sciences and earths and herbs and all of these things. And so this is the beauty of our faith, isn't it?
You want a child? Well, if you give us money, we'll get you a child. No, God has a plan and a purpose. The closer we stick to his plans and his purposes, the better off we'll be. And I am afraid that we are heading towards we're already not a healthy society. Like physically, we're not healthy. Certainly mentally and spiritually, we're not. And I'm really afraid that we're just going to have another generation where that even the babies don't have the viriditas, as St. Hildegard would call it.
Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host. Today we're going to do something a little different. As most of you know, I was a professional chef for many, many years. I still love to cook and especially love to cook healthy. And not only that, we've learned through the years here, especially the last 5 or 10 years, that our food and medical institutions are not doing, they don't have our best interests in mind. Let's just put it that way. And it's very important for each of us to start to take care of our own health. With that in mind, we're going to be talking about St. Hildegard's Garden, recipes and remedies for healing body and soul. You're going to meet a doctor of the church. There's only 4 women doctors of the church, and she's one of them. It's very exciting, actually, whose wisdom on health and nutrition will aid you in everything from better digestion and sleep to improve mood, memory, and pain relief. So here with me today is Leila Marie Lawler. She's a wife, mother of 7, grandmother of many. She lives in central Massachusetts. She encountered Christianity in high school, entered the Catholic Church in 1979, the year she was married to Philip Lawler, noted Catholic author and editor of Catholic World News. I'll give you a couple more tidbits about Leila. She practices kitchen sink philosophy on her website, Like Mother, Like Daughter. I poked around there a little bit. It's really good. She writes on everything from cooking, education, and recovering what she and her daughters call the collective memory. We'll have to hear what that's about. Her book, The Little Oratory, which she wrote with David Clayton, A Beginner's Guide to Praying in the Home. Dr. Scott Hahn said some nice things about it. He said it's one of the most beautiful books he's ever seen. It's inspiring yet practical, realistic yet revolutionary. If one book has the potential to transform the Catholic family and society, this is it. That's a big deal coming from Scott
Right?
Hahn. It's amazing. And, Lila, before I bring you on, we have a lot of young people joining us now. We have, behind me is a sword. That's a Claymore sword. We have an apostolate within our apostolate, Claymore, Militus Christi, Soldiers for Christ, for all these young men especially, and all the people that love them. And they're stepping up. They want to know more and more and more. And let me just mention 1 or 2 other quick books here. Her book, God Has No Children, and the reason I want to bring this up,
No
it's
grandchildren, no
no
grandchildren.
grandchildren. Thank you for that. A guided reading of Pope Pius XI's encyclical Casti Connubii on marriage. And it's when you read that document, which I read parts of it not too long ago, it's still important. In fact, it's incredibly important. Maybe
Oh
one of the
yeah,
most important church documents.
it's actually the most complete explication of the church's teaching on marriage. It is still the most complete. And so what I did
It's
was I did a
amazing.
guided reading of it because it is a little tricky to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. So, with all that said, look, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank
I'll
you.
just tell our audience that you were a little late getting on, so we're taking our breath here a little bit. And I did a long intro so Lila could relax a minute or two. It's a crazy how our world gets, but Lila, it's great to be with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us this: with all the books that you've written, all the articles, all the blogs, we're actually going to be talking about a book that you did not write. It's published by Sophia Press, and I do a lot of things with Sophia Press myself. So tell us how you got involved in this.
Right. So this book actually is written by Paul Ferris, and he is a Frenchman. It was written in French. It was published in Italy, and they translated it. Sophia translated it for our audience, and they asked me to write the foreword. And, that was so obviously very flattering and also just exciting. And I was also a little cautious because St. Hildegard is often misunderstood. So I was careful. I was kind of like, well, what is this book about? What are you going to say? And actually, they sent me the text of it. They sent me the French version. And I was kind of like, okay, well, do you have a translation so I can look at it? And they're like, no, not yet. And I said, okay, fine, I'll read it in French. So I did read it in French, which takes me a little longer, but I did it. And I said, yes, this is good. I'm excited about this. So I wrote the foreword and, they asked me, I gather that Mr. Ferris doesn't speak English and would be in a very different time zone. And,
Yes.
so I think, yeah, they just basically were like, would you go and talk about it? So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to have you on because
Thank you.
I met your husband, Phil Lawler, and at a friend's house and out in the suburbs of Chicago at one time, but I never met you. So it is a
Yeah,
pleasure. And please tell Phil that Jack Riggard with the John Paul II Renewal Center
I
said to
will.
say hello. So tell us a little bit about this book. What got you excited? I didn't get a chance to go through everything in the book, but like I said, I'm a professional chef. My parents were both professional chefs. My grandparents were professional
Wow.
chefs.
Wow.
And so I stepped away from it about 25 years ago, but I still love to cook, and especially when you start to talk about medicinal herbs and different ways to heal your body. I mean, it's very important stuff today.
Yes, the interest in herbal medicine has risen. And, you alluded to our experience, especially in the last 5 years, where I think a lot of us did kind of say, well, hold on, wait, what is it do they have our best interests at heart? Why? And it's so interesting because I actually got stopped on the street a couple of years ago where we were in Maine, and this lady who had met me at a talk somewhere, she said, I think I know you. You're not going to remember me. But then right away got into a conversation about how she never really had questioned things especially about her children, but that during the lockdown time, she, like the rest of us, had time to look things up and question and investigate more. And she said, her trust was really shaken. And I think that is true for many people. And it's very interesting because the herbal remedies are very old and they're really being rediscovered. It's not like, oh, here's some random things. It's actually not only ancient remedies that do work, and even a lot of them have had scientific studies done on them. And it has been affirmed that, in trials, in tests, as opposed to like the clinical world of just how you treat your
Yes.
family, whatever, that they do have an effect. But also that the pharmaceutical industry itself uses a lot of the compounds that are in the herbs. A lot of what they are doing in their medications does derive from the herbs. However, what it is an industrialized version, and then very often compounds that are extracted and given in a form that maybe is not in its context. So a lot of times with the herbs that are effective, it's because they're effective within the whole plant. And
Yes.
so just getting the knowledge of foraging them yourself, or knowing if you're buying them where they come from versus a synthetic analog that's, some company, and maybe even there's even been, when we are ordering supplements, there have been some concerning reports that those supplements are coming from abroad and that we may not even know whether they are what the label says. So, yeah, for me, it was funny because basically I think it was midway through lockdown. I said, you know what? I have herbs, culinary herbs in my garden. And I really want to have a medicinal herb garden too. So I started ordering seeds and I started looking things up. And yeah, I kind of went down that rabbit hole. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. It's important. The more I learn about the human body, I got into John Paul's work and he brings me in this theology of the body. And the more you study the actual body itself, the more miraculous it is. Every once in a while, on a fairly regular basis, I'll do 72 to 90-hour fasts. And it's amazing how your body just eats up all of these free radicals and all these different things. And you
Yeah.
realize your body's amazing. You just got to put the right things into your body and let
Right.
it go to work.
For sure. So Saint Hildegard, so she's a 12th century saint.
Yeah, tell us about her a little bit.
Yeah.
It's
And
fascinating.
it is so fascinating. And yeah, I became interested in her back in 2012 when Pope Benedict canonized her and then made her doctor of the church. And that was so fascinating too, because to think that there was this ancient saint and that, but she wasn't canonized, that was so interesting.
Yeah,
And
it
then,
is interesting. What took so, do we know what took so
yeah,
long?
no, I don't know. And then I think it's because there are saints. I mean, this is I haven't really investigated, but I think it's because there are saints who everybody just accepts as saints. And, the canonization process is like the official word. This
Yeah,
is a
that's right.
saint. But there are many saints who
But
are
to make her a
revered.
doctor, though,
I know. So
right?
then he was like, she's a doctor of the church. And I remember kind of thinking, okay, well, what's going on here? Is it a kind of a sop to women, the DEI of like this pantheon or whatever? So I was a little skeptical. But then when I read what he had to say, then I started looking into it and I was like, no, she's the real deal. Hildegard is by far one of the most stratospheric minds,
Amazing.
a person of very great energy and intensity. She entered the monastery, or she went to live at the monastery when she was very young because her parents took her as a child. She had intense visions that almost killed her. Like she was so in tune with the mystical world, but at the same time, her mind is extremely analytical. So then she eventually became abbess. And I like to say that she basically grew up as a Benedictine. It was that way of life, that spirituality permeates her whole being. She was the person who, as the abbess, was responsible for not only the nuns over whom she had authority, but for the whole community. She was so interested and interesting that she wrote letters and corresponded with the great figures of her time, popes, emperors, cardinals, all sorts of people. And so she had her pulse on everything. She was a theologian, a philosopher, and a healer. And the the thing about the medieval approach is it is a very holistic approach, as the ancient view in many different cultures
And you know
is.
what? That's so important what you just said, because when these young people are coming, Lila, into the church, we have to make a connection with them into this whole vision. In other words, here I am with my own experiences in my own life, and then here's the church, right? And they're trying to figure out how these come together. What you just said is so important. You mentioned she was a mystic, she was analytical, and yes, she was very practical, and
Yeah.
she studied sciences and earths and herbs and all of these things. And so this is the beauty of our faith, isn't it? And I'm speaking to these young people again, Lila, as they're coming in. The beauty is that it's about everything. It's about what we touch, what we feel, what we
Yeah.
taste, and also know that these are tiny little tastes that God gives us of this big taste, right? As we start to go deeper and deeper into our faith. So everything you said there is so
Right.
important.
So that's really the medieval image, is of a hierarchical construction of the cosmos, and that every level of the hierarchy of being is reflecting the one below and above. The ones below reflect the one above. And so the human body also is a microcosm of this. And so it has to be in balance. And she systematized, it's not that she invented things, but she systematized what she knew, what she had observed, and what she had been handed. And she had a whole approach that, was so interesting because it really was about observation. So looking at the person, trying to get information from what you are observing. And she had a particular word that she coined, I think, to express what this living force really is in its connection with the whole cosmos. And she called it veriditas. And her whole healing system is based on veriditas. So if you know a little Latin, you know that at the root of that is the idea of a green living source that either, you have a good amount of or it's failing in you. And, when she takes into account like how the patient is looking, the sunshine, the rest, the warmth, the coolness. So she had that balance between warmth and chill, and then the humors. And so for her, it was all a matter of balancing. And she also believed, and I think that younger people are more open to this and maybe than people in my generation who
Yeah.
are just more used to kind of experts telling us what to do. But the idea that God in his creation has provided and that in the world, on the earth, he has provided us with what we need to be healthy. And the plants are there, and she studied them and she used them. And again, this is all knowledge that was there. It was handed down. It's things that in people in different cultures, whether Chinese or what have you, know. But she put it in
And
the
they knew a lot.
context.
They
They
knew
knew
a
a
lot.
lot,
They
and
sure
she
did.
put it in the context of the faith. And that is what's so important to
Mm.
me. Because today, I think that because we, as modernists, we've kind of separated ourselves from the natural world, I think that the new age kind of forces have co-opted
No
the
doubt.
natural world, and we need to reclaim it because the natural world is created by God, and God has a purpose, and that purpose is exhibited in this hierarchical view of nature. It's not binary. It's got a pattern and an order.
Yes, it's amazing, and well, and getting back to something you just said earlier when you said, you kind of laughed a little bit about you're probably a baby boomer, right? Are you a baby boomer?
At the end, yeah, I'm at the tail
Yeah.
end. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm a little bit more than at the tail end, but I have brothers that are younger than me that are at the tail end. And
But I
anyways,
have more gray hair than you do.
it's just a light. I'll turn a little sideways and I have him come in. But here it is, Lila. So when I'm speaking to young people, you mentioned maybe we just followed the experts, right? Because we
Right.
we trusted,
We trusted, yeah.
what happened since COVID, it was happening before that, but certainly since COVID, is that these young people are looking around and realizing that the experts don't know everything. And in fact, many of the experts, and I'll just be perfectly blunt, they lied to them. And when you hear that and you wonder, okay, I'm being lied to. They told me, to look at this, and now I'm addicted to pornography. To drink this, and now I did, blah 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 blah. And how do I get out of this? Well, they're sensing something wrong, and that's the beauty of what you just said. This
Well, yeah,
holistic movement.
especially because the main thing that they have now, the main paradigm that we are given in the health world is that it's a paradigm of a machine. And the idea is that the machine is fundamentally flawed and that it needs to have these periodic, and I mean, I don't know, like injections that like you have to have your fluids replaced or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're even worse, a computer. And so the idea that you look at a healthy baby and you say, for this baby to survive, we need to give it 72 injections.
It's amazing.
There's something there where, so I feel like if St. Hildegard were there and looking, she would
Yes.
say, well, it's true that human nature is flawed from the fall. At the same time, our bodies, we're given an intellect and we're given a body, and our bodies actually have the ability to heal themselves. And, you know, my son-in-law is a surgeon, and he says that one thing you learn in surgery, in practicing surgery, is that 1/3 of the time the surgeon is really helping, and 1/3 of the time the body is healing itself, and the surgeon is kind of maybe, even when he's helping, he's kind of just trying to get the body to heal itself. And 1/3 of the time, he's actually harming. And I wish that more doctors had that humility, because the human body will repair itself, but it has to be brought into balance. And that's where her vision and her understanding really comes in, maybe to help us overcome this other image we have, which is not a good image, that we're just a machine that breaks down, and somehow we need expensive pharmaceuticals to keep us going. That does not seem right
No,
to
and
me.
you know the sad thing, and what we found out. My youngest daughter is a doctor, and what you find out is they spend so much time just learning to use some type of a pill, right, to fix everything. So I'm going to ask Lila, you know, how do you feel today? Okay, I got a pill. I got a prescription for you. I see
Do
the
they
same
ask
thing.
you if you have had rest? Do they
Yes,
ask you
right?
how much you go outside?
Or
Do
how do
they
you eat? Yes,
Right. And
all
do they
these
sit
things.
and look at you? Do they look at you and say, how does she appear? What is her viriditas? Like, this is not something that is normal in our healthcare system, and it needs to be. And the thing is that we especially need to get away from this idea of that if we're healthy, we need injections, because that's not how it works. Sure, if you're sick, or if you have broken a bone or something, then yes, you need intervention. Then we have to ask what the quality of that intervention is. But
Yes.
if it's just that we're healthy, well, then it comes down to, yeah, what are you eating? What are you going outside and getting sunshine? Like, those are the important things that we have to do for each other.
Yes, yes, yes. You know, I'm going to stretch this just a little bit for again for these young people coming in. Costi Kanubi, that we just mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
we work a lot with NFP, theology of the body, talk about IVF, and so it's the same thing. I had Dr. Hilders on from the Paul Sixth Institute, and when you use something like IVF, you never go to your point underneath and find out what's really affecting a woman's body, right? What is her health? All we
So,
do is we want to
yeah,
manufacture a solution, and I don't want to go too deep there, but
yeah.
I just want to say, even that, right? I know people that are coming into and looking at NFP just to get rid of these chemicals and stuff affecting their bodies.
Sure, sure. And even let's take even a step further back, besides just that IVF doesn't address the problems of infertility at all. What about saying, how can it be good for a child to be conceived outside of its mother's womb? So right there, we have to say our humanity, not to mention the divine end that we are supposed to be aiming for, demands that we follow God's plan. And God's plan is that the child be conceived in its mother's womb. We can know some things about that process. We will never know all the things that He has intended for that process. And when you start tinkering, listen, even if we were talking about a machine, when you start just willy-nilly tinkering with that machine, you are going to break it. And in ways that you might not know until way later.
That's
Like,
right.
oh, wow, I was driving down the highway at 75 miles an hour and I realized what that screw was for. And this is with the child. It's like we can't look at a child and say, this is a kind of machine and we can manipulate it. And, oh, you want a child? Well, if you give us money, we'll get you a child. No, God has a plan and a purpose. The closer we stick to His plans and His purposes, the better off we'll be. And I am afraid that we are heading towards having, I mean, we're already not a healthy society. Like, physically, we're not healthy. Certainly mentally and spiritually, we're not. And I'm really afraid that we're just going to have another generation where that even the babies don't have the viriditas, as St. Hildegard would call it, to, isn't that the least that we could hope for, is like, well, we're just giving a baby a normal life, like just normal health. And
Yeah.
sure, like there will be ups and downs. And that's what people who are called to be doctors, they should be focused on, oh, if there's something really wrong, we will help you. But the idea of we're going to now manipulate things against God's plan, I think one of the most fundamental things that we can know about human nature is that God's plan is that the child be within its mother's womb from the conception.
Yeah, and the reason, and how does this fit together? Okay, it sounds like we went off on a couple of tangents, but we didn't. And the reason I wanted to bring, and thank you for that. The reason I wanted to bring this in is that when somebody is new coming into the church, what I've learned, and what you're expressing right there, is that you're finding out all these human experts don't always know as much as they think they know. And so if I'm new coming into the church, I am going to trust now. I mean, this is the idea. I have to trust some higher authority. And when we walk into the church, what I always tell young people, look at until you spent a little more time in the church and figure things out, just trust her. Try trusting her, because your life, you're in the church because you're tired of what's going on behind you and in your
Right.
own experience. So now you step into the church. And so this is the beauty, and I want to get back to the book here a little bit, and Saint Hildegard, but this is the beauty of it. Just trust, right? Because there's a lot of things we don't know about our own bodies that we just talked about. And so
Yeah,
the
for
beauty of
sure.
God's plan, right?
Yes,
Right, the point is the bottom line, beauty of God's plan
of
for us.
his plan, of which she is quite the apostle. And in the book, so I think that, there are, I mean, I myself personally own several books that are more like encyclopedias of herbs and their
Mm,
remedies and their
okay.
uses and so on. This book isn't exactly that. What it is a beautiful book that looks lovely on the
Mm,
table
yes, it does.
and it has my forward, which speaks about how to approach her, maybe because we have some preconceptions in our modern time, even about the fact that she's a woman. We might think of her as some sort of rebel, and she was not a rebel. In fact, if you go, I say in my forward, if you go to like one of the main websites, if you just type in St. Hildegard, you'll come to a website that says she's like a pioneer of feminism, which is ridiculous because actually she submitted totally to the hierarchy of the church. And some people claim that because she preached, she went out into the square, she went out into the world and preached about God and the Trinity, about our Lord Jesus Christ and about his Blessed Mother. And so they think like, oh, because she was a woman, this made her some sort of rebellious figure, a pioneer of feminism. But actually, she preached at the invitation of two popes. So this whole paradigm of like the conflict between men and women, she would laugh at that and think that that was silly.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing I talk about in the forward. And then there's the introduction by Paul Ferris, which is a biography of her, which is very
Mm,
interesting and goes into
good.
some of the achievements that she had. And people say, oh, well, these achievements were unusual for a woman. Well, they were unusual for anyone. She was a completely unusual person. I think there's probably only one or two men in the whole history of the world that were like her. So it just, for me, it's a meaningless category. And then there is a whole long segment that has these beautiful, see if I
Wow.
can hold it up and
Yeah,
people can
yes.
see. So these beautiful prints, which I find actually very useful because sometimes a picture, a photograph that you might look up if you were looking something up on the internet and you see a photograph, it actually isn't as helpful in
Mm,
identifying the herb as a print that shows you the root, the way the flowers look, and the way the plant looks at different stages of its development, the seeds, and so on. And then there are excerpts from her writings about the particular plant. Then there's another section that's remedies. So taking a lot of the plants she spoke about and saying what they're good for. And those go beyond what you might find if you were just doing a search for them online, because she has, again, she's looking at the whole person, including their spiritual outlook. So she is often saying what the use of the plant would be for the spiritual state of the person,
wow, I
as well
love
as
this. I love
for their
this.
health, which is,
Yeah.
we need that. And it's
Yeah.
true. So I'll give you just a quick note. It's so interesting because when I was thinking about my medicinal garden and I was thinking about planting things purposefully in my garden, I realized, oh, actually, a lot of these things are literally weeds. They're literally things that I do not need to plant in my garden because they just grow out in the brush or what have you down my lane, and I can gather them at will, and it's really not a problem. And one of those things is goldenrod, which is something
Wow.
that I use a lot in my remedies. It's just an all-around wonderful herb that comes out in the end of summer.
Isn't that something,
And
huh?
I will say,
That's
like, just
beautiful,
to
yeah.
this point of the physical benefit of the herb and the spiritual. So goldenrod is very good for your overall health, for urinary health, for all sorts of things and allergies. But I noticed I would dry it and put it in the jar. And then when I went to get it to make a tea, I would open the jar and I would smell it and I would just have such a sense of well-being. The scent of the goldenrod just gives you a wonderful sense of happiness and well-being. And it's kind of like we need that. Like we're
And I think that
surrounded.
grows anywhere, doesn't it,
Yeah,
Lila?
it's all out
Right?
there.
I think
Everyone
I have
has.
it around my house.
Yeah,
Isn't it? Now
absolutely.
I can use it. So when we're talking about this book, we're talking about it's actually going to talk about Saint Hildegard herself because
Yes.
she's fascinating to your point. And again, when I'm thinking about these young people, I mean, it's amazing how much the more you look into the church, the more you see these gifts and these people coming in as gifts. And
Right.
when you're talking about, the church doesn't, respect women or whatever, and you see this, her St. Catherine of Siena, they went around talking to, like you said, to popes, to, writing letters to everybody.
Yeah.
It's amazing that they have. So God brings them into this beautiful story, and they're exemplary. I mean, it's amazing beauty that they
Yeah.
bring to us.
Yes, for sure. And if we can just kind of get over this idea that everything's in conflict and instead, and this is the
Yes,
beauty of the
thank you.
church, is to see that we're
Yes.
meant to cooperate and that's the medieval mind. The medieval mind is about cooperating both with other people and with nature and the cosmos. And so, I mean, she had the Emperor Barbarossa writing to her and saying, "Could you give me medical advice?" And there was no conflict there. Yeah, I think that if we're looking at the church and her saints, we just find think of it as like pockets and corners of like, I had no idea there was this
Yes,
person and
constantly.
she's so wonderful. Then the last section of the book is recipes, actually.
Okay, I was going
Those
to ask you. Thank
yeah,
you. I was going to. I bet you I would have forgot about the recipes, and that's important to all of us, right? Now,
yeah.
let me ask you this, Lila. With the recipes, do we have to grow this stuff ourselves, or somebody like me can pick the book and say, I want to make this. Can I go out and buy those herbs? Can I find them around?
I mean,
Okay.
some of them, so for instance, the one that I want to try is honey-filled iris rhizomes. So I think people have irises in their gardens and they multiply and eventually you have to divide them and you can pull up some of those rhizomes which are very close to the surface and prepare them and mix them with honey, and that is a would be a remedy for frenzy, nervous crises, excessive excitement, tremors, palpitations. And then there are
Isn't that
things
something? Like
then there
heart
is
palpitations?
heart
Yes.
palpitations, yeah.
Isn't that something? Wow.
Yeah, and I mean if you
So this
looked
is some.
I haven't ever looked into like what heart medications are, but I bet if you looked into it, you would find out that there was some derivative of these plants in those
Interesting.
medications. So
Yeah,
personally, I
interesting.
would rather go to my garden that I know has not been
Yeah, yeah.
sprayed or anything. Then here's a recipe, chestnuts with sage butter. Now, I don't make my own butter. Maybe some of our listeners have a dairy cow. That would be awesome. I wish I had a dairy cow.
Or a friend with the dairy cow, one or the other.
Yes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then it calls for chestnuts, which I suppose you would buy, but actually I do have chestnuts on my lane. They are Chinese chestnuts, and some years, if the weather has been right, I can go collect them.
I mean, and I love sage. I love sage. You said
Sage,
chestnuts and
sage
sage.
is very easy to grow. And in my zone is zone 6A, and the sage comes back. It is perennial. So these things are easy to grow. That's not a problem growing sage. But you can buy
Yes.
it for sure. You could go to the farmer's market and get the sage.
So we're getting a lot in this book, and again, we can buy it from where? From Sophia
Sophia
Haas. That's the
Institute
best place to get
Press.
it.
Yep, Sophia Institute Press. You can get it wherever you get books.
I just want to put a plug in for Sophia Institute Press, and I'll make sure, again, I have it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to take a little longer to get to you. It even might cost you $1 or $2 more sometimes, but it's worth it. And it may
Yeah.
not. It may not.
Their
But
shipping is pretty fast. I have to say they ship things really fast. They're
yeah.
great.
So if you're feeling good today, not only about the book, but about these Catholic publishers, and try to support them. Anyways, that's just all I'll
Yes,
say
for sure.
about that, because I love fast things and whatever too. But in
Haven't
this
you
case,
found that Amazon has gone super slow?
well, let's say no. I haven't found
You
it, but it
haven't?
doesn't matter. It doesn't
Maybe
matter.
it's where I live. They're really
Today,
slow.
today we have a special on Sophia Institute Press, and I love them, and they
Yeah.
do some incredible work. It's worth going there, Lila, isn't it, just to explore the books, and they can find your books there too, can't they?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, guys, we're going to start to unwind here a little bit. I'm going to give you the last word, but you're such a joy, and thank you for taking the time. And I think, this book has got so many things in it, but I think just for young people coming in and old people, all of us coming in and getting to know this doctor of the church, fascinating person, bringing us some, just to read what she was doing, and these natural ways to live and take care of your body, and some good recipes back there. I'm definitely going to put this book to use myself.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. I always say healthcare is 90% or more nursing care. The people in the family,
Yes.
the mother of the family needs to know how to take care of her children. The resources are all around us. So the book, I think, is very helpful in that.
Yes. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks for joining us today. Goodbye, everyone. We're going to ask you to join us by helping us get the word out. So if you can make sure you subscribe and then hit like, no matter which platform you're on. Remember that the Become Who You Are podcast is on audio, on any music or podcast app. We're up on Rumble, YouTube. You can find us on X. When you do subscribe, hit the like button. A couple things to share with people. Love Ed. Love Ed is just such an important apostolate. So it's within our apostolate, the John Paul II Renewal Center. This helps parents give the talk to their children, to push back on all these gender ideologies and the porn culture, and give children the truth, and do it through their parents, huh? And we help them do that. The other one is really taken off too. It's Claymore Militus Christi, Soldiers for Christ. That's where you see the sword behind me. That's the big sword. That's our logo for Claymore. That's a Claymore sword, and this is for young people, especially young men, Gen Z, high school, all the way through. Let's call it till they're 30 years old or so. They're starting to really understand that something nefarious, sounds very toxic, is going on in the culture, and so they're stepping into the church, and we're discipling them. So we want to help get the word out about those things. And lastly, consider financially supporting us. Everything's in the show notes. Hey, God bless you. Thanks again.